Hey there, welcome to the channel. If you're looking for the perfect way to unwind and drift off to sleep, you're in the right place. Tonight, we've got a whole hour of some of the most interesting and emotional Reddit stories from crazy family. Dramas to heartwarming moments to help you relax and escape the day. So get comfortable, let go of your worries, and let these stories carry you into a peaceful sleep. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoy this, and make sure to subscribe for more stories to relax to in the future. Now let's get started and dive into tonight's tales. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's fall asleep together. Enjoy.
I work at a nightclub. It's one of those places that looks cool on the outside. Sleek lighting, loud music, trendy cocktails. But behind the scenes, it's chaos. The kind of chaos that you can only really understand if you've worked in the service industry. People screaming over the bass, last-minute VIP tables getting added, broken glass behind the bar, drunk customers being borderline belligerent or worse, co-workers arguing over who's cut next. Just general madness. It's fast-paced and unpredictable, and not everyone is cut out for it. I've learned to roll with it over the years, but I'm not going to lie. It wears on you. Especially when you feel like you're not being treated with respect. That's the situation I'm in now. I, 27F, have worked in nightlife long enough to know what I'm doing. I know my job, I take it seriously, and I take pride in the work. I do. I've been at this particular club for over a year, and yet, I've got a manager who seems to have made me her personal punching bag. We'll call her Dana. Dana is technically in charge during our shifts. She's the floor manager. But she's one of those people who seems to resent having to manage and takes it out on others. She barks orders, makes passive-aggressive comments, disappears during rushes, and then reappears just in time to nitpick everything we've done. One night, we were in the middle of closing. That's usually the most exhausting part of the shift. Everyone's running on fumes. We're wiping down sticky counters, taking out smelly trash, restocking, mopping. And of course, still dealing with straggler customers who don't want to leave. Dana comes out of the office and says, "What still needs to be done?" I respond honestly. "I don't know." I wasn't being sarcastic. I literally didn't know. I had just finished my assigned duties, cleaned the bar, refilled the fridges, restocked the napkins and straws, all of it. I had been so in the zone with my own tasks, I wasn't keeping tabs on everyone else's. And frankly, that's not my job. Isn't it her job, as the manager, to know what still needs to be done? Or at least to be checking in with everyone, apparently? Not according to her. She gave me this sharp look and said something like, "Well, that's not very helpful." I stayed quiet because honestly, I was too tired to argue. But I was annoyed. How is it on me to know every little thing that's still unfinished in a building that holds over 100 people? After we closed, she pulled me aside and said we needed to chat. I already knew what kind of conversation it was going to be. Not a real conversation, just a dressing down disguised as feedback. I didn't want to stay. One of my coworkers, let's call her Jess, was already clocking out. I started moving toward the back to grab my bag, and Dana said something like, "If you walk out right now, I'll cut your hours." It was a threat. She didn't say it like she was joking. It landed with a thud. So I sat back down. I forced myself to sit there while she talked at me. She asked me what I thought could be done better, what suggestions I had, and I answered carefully. I said, "I don't think it's really my place to make decisions about staffing or operations. That's your job." Which I meant respectfully, because it is her job. But she took it the wrong way. Her face changed immediately, like I had accused her of being incompetent. I hadn't, but that's how she took it. She ended the conversation pretty quickly after that. The next day I wrote to her and explained that I wasn't trying to be rude, that I just meant it's not my role to manage the whole floor. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. It was like I had committed some kind of unforgivable crime by not kissing the ring. From that point on, everything I did was scrutinized. If I showed up 2 minutes late, she'd make a comment. If I asked a question, she'd roll her eyes. It started to feel personal. Fast forward a few weeks. I had worked a super long shift, like 8 hours straight, no break, just slammed the whole time. Toward the end of it, I was completely wiped. I went up to Dana and asked if I could get cut, since my section was empty and it was slowing down. She said, "Yeah, go ahead." So I clocked out and went home. Turns out, that created some issues. Apparently when I left, the remaining staff got overwhelmed. I didn't know that. I wasn't there. But here's the kicker. Dana never told anyone she had cut me. Not the other servers, not the GM, no one. So when they were looking around wondering where I was, nobody had any idea I had been allowed to leave. The following week, the GM pulled me aside and asked what happened. I said, "Dana cut me." He looked confused and said, "Really?" That's when I realized she didn't back me up. She didn't take accountability for the decision she made. She let it fall on me, like I had just ghosted the shift. I was furious. I'm not the kind of person to lie about something like that. I'd never just leave without permission. So I decided to talk to her. I asked, calmly, "Hey, did you tell the GM that you cut me last week?" She looked at me like I had grown a second head. "I don't remember cutting you," she said. "That couldn't have happened. You don't close on that day." I tried to remind her that she had, in fact, told me to go. But she kept doubling down, acting like I was making it up. She said, "Are you sure you didn't just leave?" At that point, I said, "I don't want to talk about this anymore." I tried to walk away, but she wouldn't let it go. She kept pushing the conversation, getting more and more aggressive, until finally she pivoted into criticizing my performance. Out of nowhere, she started saying things like, "You're not as strong a closer as some of the others," and "Your coworker finishes the floor way better than you." I was floored. Just a few weeks ago, I had asked her to check my work before I left one night, and she said, "I trust you." "So which is it?" I said. "You're escalating this." She didn't like that, not one bit. She told me to meet her in private, and in the back office, she started tearing into me, saying, "This isn't brain surgery, and you think you know everything." She even brought up other coworkers, saying, "Other people have said, you're difficult." That felt like a gut punch. If someone has a problem with how I work, I'd rather they tell me directly. But no, she hid behind anonymous complaints instead of giving me honest feedback. And I couldn't shake the feeling that she was just deflecting. She knew she had messed up by not communicating to the team that she had cut me early. And instead of owning it, she was trying to paint me as unreliable. After that blow-up, things got worse. She told the GM that I had talked back to her, that I was disrespectful, that I had a bad attitude. I tried to do damage control. I wrote her another message, apologizing if my tone had come off as rude, and reiterating that I hadn't meant to cause any issues. I explained again that it was a misunderstanding. She replied, "Your delivery is not good." No acknowledgement of the apology, no shared responsibility, just more blame. Now her little circle of friends at work, people who have known her longer, are siding with her, whispering, giving me side eyes, treating me like I'm the difficult one, like I'm the one stirring the pot. But all I ever wanted was to be treated fairly, to not have my hours threatened when I answer honestly, to not be blamed for something I was given permission to do, to not be gaslit into thinking I imagined a conversation that absolutely happened. So here I am, wondering, because from their perspective, I'm the rude one, the difficult one, the one who talked back. But from where I'm standing, I see someone in a position of power who's dodging accountability, who resents being questioned, and who's trying to save face by throwing me under the bus. It's demoralizing. It makes me dread going to work. And the worst part is, I actually used to enjoy this job. I liked the fast pace. I liked the customers. I even liked my coworkers, most of them. But this makes me feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells. So tell me, Reddit, Aita for standing up for myself, for clarifying things when someone tried to rewrite the past, for refusing to roll over and accept blame for things I didn't do. Because I'm starting to feel like maybe I should have just stayed silent, and that's a really crappy place to be. I used to think of myself as the fun older cousin, the one who could swoop in with juice boxes and dinosaur puzzles, the one whose lap was a safe harbor at family gatherings. Growing up, I was inseparable from my uncle. His laughter echoed through my earliest memories, and when he told me stories about his childhood, I felt like I was part of some secret club. So when my aunt and uncle announced they were expecting, I couldn't wait to be chosen as godmother. I daydreamed about what that would mean. First steps captured on my phone, birthdays celebrated with a carefully curated selection of gifts, whispered nightly prayers, the whole 9 yards. I even imagined writing letters to him when he was older, telling him that his godmother had always believed in him. A month or two before the baptism, I was in the kitchen of my aunt's house, helping her rinse vegetables for the christening luncheon. The table was heaped with trays of deviled eggs and fruit salad, and the air smelled like fresh parsley in anticipation. She looked up from the sink with a sly smile and said, "Oh, by the way, we've decided on godparents." My heart fluttered. "Yes?" I asked, voice light. She grabbed a towel and casually shrugged. "It'll be Sean and Emily." I felt the spatula slip from my hand, vegetables tumbling onto the floor. "Wait, what about me?" My voice came out too loud, too desperate. She dried her hands, tilted her head, and said, "It was a family vote. Both godparents are from my side." And just like that, my title vanishing, I realized I'd been bumped off the guest list of honor. I mopped the floor with shaking hands, told myself it wasn't a big deal, that I was happy for them, that family tradition mattered more. But as I tucked the dish towel under my arm and walked to the pantry, my stomach roiled with betrayal. In the months that followed, I tried to carry on as if nothing had happened. When the baby, my cousin, arrived, I helped unwrap his tiny sweater and marvel at his strawberry blonde hair, but a ghost of resentment hovered in the background. My uncle and I stopped our frequent phone calls. Casual texts dwindled. When we met, I was polite, but our easy laughter felt strained, like mismatched puzzle pieces. Meanwhile, my aunt seemed oblivious. She continued to call me every time she needed someone to watch him for an afternoon or an evening, as though godmotherhood had been an afterthought, replaced by cousin who babysits. Some weekends she'd text me Saturday morning. "Could you pick him up from preschool and keep him until dinner?" Other times it was, "I have a last-minute work thing. Can you cover 8 hours tomorrow?" Every time, because I still loved him, I said yes. I pictured his smile, the way he'd throw his arms around my waist. I thought I was doing the right thing, proving that my heart was bigger than her mistake. By the time I started college, my calendar was a jigsaw puzzle of classes, study sessions, part-time shifts, and babysitting slots. I'd write deadlines next to pickup times in my planner until the pages bled into one another. When I finally saved up enough to move into a tiny apartment near campus, I thought I'd found freedom, space between me and those old dynamics. But the babysitting requests followed. My aunt called me at odd hours. "Your cousin's daycare is closed tomorrow. Can you take him?" "My husband's in a conference. Can you keep him overnight?" Sometimes her voice sounded frantic. Other times it was breezy, as if she were asking a neighbor for sugar. Either way, I rearranged my life, always making room for him. I told myself I was lucky to be needed, that the guilt of letting her down was worse than staying up with a cranky 4-year-old. Then, last week, she sent a text that felt like a punch in the gut. It was Thursday evening when my phone rang, with her name flashing. "Hey, sweetie," she began, voice calm. "We're in a real bind. Can you watch him starting tomorrow morning through Tuesday afternoon?" I stared at the words. My midterm exam was Friday morning. I had a group project, presentation Monday, and a paper due Wednesday. I typed, "I'm so sorry, But I have 3 exams and a presentation next week. I can't. My aunt didn't just hear no, she heard a challenge. Her reply was swift. But nobody else can. You're the only one we trust, can't you? Just skip a class or 2? I stared at the screen. Skip class, fail, trash months of studying. No, I replied. I can't. I put my phone down and tried to focus on my textbooks, but my mind jumped back and forth between quantum mechanics formulas and my aunt's pleading words. The next morning, my uncle knocked on my door. I opened it to find him looking weary, eyes apologetic. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said quietly, "but your aunt really needs your help. She's tried everyone else." I closed the door in his face and sank to the floor. I felt a sharp knot of guilt, tinged with anger. Anger. At my aunt for assuming I'd drop everything again. Anger at myself for letting it get this far. I cried, not for the exams I needed to study for, but for the version of myself who once would have said yes without hesitation. That night I asked my roommate to keep my camera feed on group study so I wouldn't be tempted to scroll through messages. I scribbled in my notebook, trying to make sense of my feelings. "Why do I feel guilty?" I wrote. "Because I love him? Because I hate that she replaced my honor with Aaron's? Because I've never set a boundary?" The words blurred. As I reflected on the baptism betrayal, on the countless weekends I'd lost, on the scholarship interviews I'd almost missed, I realized I had a right to my own life. On Tuesday evening, after my presentation, I finally called my aunt. Her voice sounded tight when she answered. "Look, Aunt, I know you're stressed. I can't help with cousin this time." She started to say something, but I cut in gently. "I love him, you know that. But I have to focus on my degree right now. I won't be able to babysit next time either." A silence stretched across the line. She whispered, "I understand," and hung up. It wasn't the triumphant moment I imagined, but it was honest. I didn't expect an apology, and she didn't offer one. I suppose in her mind, family obligations never end. But I felt a wave of relief that I hadn't felt in years. Relief that I could study without panic. Relief that the weekend ahead was mine to shape. Relief that I'd finally protected my own boundaries. My uncle texted 2 days later to say thanks, and I realized he'd been caught in the same bind, torn between loyalty and exhaustion. Now, when people ask how I'm doing, I say I'm busy but good. I still love my cousin, but I'll care for him on my terms. Scheduled visits, pre-planned weekends, and no more emergency calls at midnight. I've learned that family doesn't automatically own you, and being kind doesn't mean being endlessly available. Saying no was terrifying, but it was also liberating. I no longer feel like a doormat, and I know I'm not a bad person for putting my own life first. Maybe one day my aunt will understand, but for now, I'm content in the knowledge that respect goes both ways, and that sometimes loving someone means giving them space to grow rather than holding them close in your own. I've always liked the idea of being the cool older cousin, someone my little 4-year-old cousin could look up to, teach him things, take him to fun places, spoil him a little. Growing up, my uncle and I were inseparable. His laughter was something I craved on family road trips. His tight hugs made me feel important. When my aunt and uncle announced they were having a baby, I was over the moon. Before I even knew the gender, they told me they'd picked me to be godmother. I remember throwing my hands in the air, grinning so wide I thought my face would split. "I'm going to get him the best godmother gifts ever," I told Mom, bouncing on my toes. It felt like stepping into a new role, someone official, someone special. But about 2 months before the baptism, everything changed. My uncle and I were out on their back porch, watching the sunset, talking about baby names. He casually mentioned they'd had a family council and picked godparents. My heart tipped. "Oh?" I said, trying to sound casual. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, your aunt decided on her side of the family. So Kyle's godfather will be her nephew Sean, and godmother will be her niece Emily." The world tilted. "Wait, what about me?" I managed, voice cracking. He looked away. "I'm sorry. You know how she is. She wanted both from her family line. It's complicated." I swallowed hard, nodding as if I understood. But inside I felt cold and hollow, like someone had yanked the filling out of my chest. I forced a smile, told him it was okay, that I was thrilled for them, that I'd do anything else they needed. He patted my hand. I plastered on a grin. But that night, I sat alone in my room, tears streaking my cheeks, realizing that the one person I thought I mattered to most had let me go. After that, things between us got awkward. I tried to reach out, texts that went unanswered, calls that went straight to voicemail. When we did see each other, I'd plaster on politeness, but the easy comfort we once shared was gone. My aunt, though, never seemed to notice the rift. If anything, she pushed me even closer into a new role, free babysitter. It started small, an afternoon here, an evening there, usually with less than 48 hours notice. "Could you keep him for a couple hours Saturday?" she'd chirp. "I just have errands." And I'd drop everything, because I still loved. The kid, and the guilt of being a bad aunt, was strong. She never asked anyone else. Her sister lived 2 streets over, but somehow always had plans. Cousins worked odd shifts, but weren't reliable. It was always me. By second semester of college, I had assignments piling up, group projects, exams. But whenever she texted, I dropped everything. I tried to compartmentalize, it's just babysitting, no big deal. But by spring, I was exhausted. My evenings vanished, replaced by toddler tantrums, picky eater meltdowns, cleanup of spilled snacks and crayon art on the walls. I still remember sitting at my desk at midnight, blinking at an essay prompt, wishing my aunt would just ask someone else. When she asked me this past weekend if I could watch him from Friday night until Tuesday evening, I paused. I stared at the text. "We're in a jam and really need you. Please say yes." My chest tightened. I was 2 days away from midterms. My brain was a scrambled scramble of dates and formulas. My schedule was printed in 3 colors on a sheet pinned to my wall. There was no room for extra chaos. I looked at my phone and typed, "I'm so sorry, but I can't. Exams coming up, and I have classes Tuesday that I can't miss." Then, I hit send and waited for the guilt-filled reply. It didn't take long. "But nobody else can do it. Your cousin's daycare is closed. We don't have a sitter. Can you just reschedule your studying?" I clenched my jaw and texted back, "I'm sorry, but it's just not possible. I have to prioritize my exams. I know it's inconvenient." Then I put my phone face down. I went back to my books, but I couldn't focus. My mind raced with self-recrimination. Was I being selfish? Couldn't I spare a few days for family? At dinner, my phone buzzed again. I hid it in my jacket pocket. 20 minutes later, it buzzed louder. I felt my stomach twist when I saw my uncle's name. I stepped into the hallway and answered. His voice was gentle but firm. "Hey, kiddo, Aunt Mary really needs you. I know it's inconvenient, but please help us out." My chest felt tight. "Uncle, I'm really sorry, I can't. I have exams. If I miss them, it could ruin my GPA." He sighed on the other end, tired. "I know you're busy. I just thought, well, I'm sorry for asking." He hung up. My eyes filled with tears. I sank onto the couch. I spent that night tossing and turning. Flashbacks of my aunt refusing me the godmother role collided with the waves of tiny socks and half-eaten crackers that had become my weekends. I felt used, manipulated, exploited. Why was I the default? Why did my aunt treat me like a free child care service when she'd refused to honor me at the baptism? Anger and hurt churned in my chest. The next morning, I woke early and texted, "My aunt before she could guilt-trip me again. I'm really sorry I can't babysit. I need to focus on my exams to graduate. Please ask someone else." Then I hit send and turned off my phone. For 2 days, I buried myself in textbooks and lecture notes. Every so often I glanced at my silent phone and felt a mix of relief and lingering guilt. On Tuesday evening, after my last exam, I opened my phone. There were 3 voicemails from my aunt, 2 texts from my uncle, and a frantic message from my cousin's daycare director. Your aunt is in tears saying she has nowhere to take Kyle tomorrow. My heart sank. I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling. A wave of clarity washed over me. I realized I'd spent years bending myself into knots for a family that didn't truly respect me. They took my availability for granted, never reciprocating kindness or acknowledging sacrifice. I remembered the baptism betrayal, the crushing rush of disappointment when I was unguarded. That moment had set the tone. I was expendable. That night, I called my aunt. My voice trembled at first. "Aunt Mary, I know you're stressed, but I can't take Kyle tomorrow either. I have to study for finals and then work on my thesis proposal." There was a crackle on the line, then her voice, thin and tight. "Don't you care at all about family?" My throat closed. "I do care," I managed. "But I have my own life, my own responsibilities. I'm not a full-time babysitter." "You knew my schedule," she sniffled. "But you're the only one who's ever helped." "Then ask someone else," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That's your responsibility as his parent. I'm sorry, but I can't help this time." And I hung up. I didn't text my uncle. He'd already been caught in the middle. Instead, I spent Wednesday morning emailing classmates, filling out forms, and slowly realizing the weight I'd lifted. The crushing expectation that I must always drop everything for my aunt's convenience. I thought about my 4-year-old cousin, and I still love him. But love doesn't mean being a doormat. Last night after class, I found a text from my aunt. "I understand you can't help. I'm sorry I put you in this position. I'll figure something else out. No further pleas, no guilt trips." I exhaled and felt a crack in the wall around my heart. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe setting a boundary taught her something. Can't erase the sting of being passed over as godmother, but I can stop letting it fuel her sense of entitlement. My relationship with my cousin is worth preserving, but it has to coexist with my responsibilities and my self-respect. At 22, I'm still learning to balance family loyalty with personal boundaries. Saying no was hard, but it was right. So here I am, listening to the late-night hum of the campus quiet, feeling simultaneously guilty and proud. I've learned that love doesn't demand endless sacrifice, and family support shouldn't be a one-way street. I'm still a little scared of the fallout. What if they never forgive me? But I know this won't be the last time I have to choose my own life over other people's demands. And next time, I'll stand firm again. Because I matter too. I, 27F, have never met anyone quite like my boyfriend's grandma, Carol. She's one of those larger-than-life personalities who seems to think every single person in the world exists to fill her relentless emotional and financial demands. Charming? Yes, on the surface, until she decides you owe her something. And lately, that something has been my bank account. My boyfriend, Alex, 29 comes from a tight-knit family, 3 siblings, all of whom live within 10 miles of each other, plus Grandma Carol holding court at the epicenter. Their family dinners are a whirlwind of casseroles, loud laughter, and salty gossip. But underneath that warmth is a recurring theme. Every few months, someone in the family needs money, and Carol is right there to champion the fundraiser. Whether it's a medical emergency, a business venture, or a church donation, she treats her kin like walking ATMs. When Alex and I first started dating, he casually warned me, "Heads up, Mom and Grandma ask for money, a lot. Just don't get roped in." I laughed it off. I'd grown up in a family that prided itself on generosity, so a little good cause seemed harmless. Until I met Carol. It all started innocently enough. A few months ago, Carol called a dozen relatives one afternoon with her signature enthusiasm. Guess what, everyone? I'm organizing a fundraiser for our church's youth program. No set amount, you just give what feels right. But to make it fun, let's double our shoe sizes to set the dollar amount. My shoe size is 8.5, so that meant a $17 donation. Not chump change, but certainly not life-ruining. I shuffled my budget around and set aside that $17, telling myself it was for a good cause. Alex, meanwhile, rolled his eyes and reminded me that Carol's fundraisers often drifted into family feuds over who gave more, who gave less, or whether the money ever reached its intended recipients. But for a while she left me alone, until the next week. I was in the middle of a Zoom meeting for work when my phone buzzed. I glanced down to see Carol on my caller ID. I muted my mic, excused myself, and stepped into the hallway. Carol, cheerful. Hi, honey. Did you get a chance to send in your donation for the church fundraiser? Me, awkward smile. Oh, hi, Grandma Carol. Not yet. I've been swamped at work. Carol, slightly sharper. Well, it's been a month now. I'm just following up. You know how important this is? I stammered an apology, promised I'd send it by the weekend, and hung up, my heart pounding. Within 2 days, I'd received a group FaceTime invitation with Alex's cousins, where Carol just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page. I refused to join. A text mocking me for being too busy for church. Another call to Alex demanding, "Why isn't your girlfriend supporting God's work?" He shut her down fast. She's already told you she can't right now. But it only seemed to fuel her obsession. Each morning I woke up to another voicemail, another text, another FaceTime invite. The nails-on-chalkboard feeling of her entitlement was suffocating. This wasn't about a single $17 donation. It was the principle of being badgered, harassed, and publicly shamed for not reaching into my personal budget on demand. Alex and I had just finished reworking our finances, paying off credit card debt, replenishing my emergency fund, and allocating for moving into our first apartment together next quarter. I budgeted down to the last $20 buffer. Anything more would tip me into overdraft territory. I've always supported causes I believe in, both financially and with volunteer hours. I coach elementary school robotics on weekends, donate to local food banks, and pitch in for animal rescue fundraisers. But Carol doesn't care about those. She cares about her church, and you give on her schedule, or you're selfish. After 2 agonizing weeks of her pestering, I told Alex, "Listen, I'm done. I refuse to talk about this with your mom or Grandma ever again. Our finances are private." He agreed. He'd been frustrated watching me wilt under her barrage. He texted his mom, "Please stop involving my name in family donations. She's not comfortable, and I'll handle things from here." That helped for a day, but Carol moved on to fresh tactics, pitting me against his cousins, sending breathless, urgent messages, and even stopping by my apartment building lobby on the pretense of just dropping off a casserole. The breaking point. Last Friday was the tipping point. I'd been out running errands, got home late, and found a white envelope slipped under my door. Curious, I opened it to find a printed invoice. Below it, in a different font, she'd typed, "Late fees may apply. Thank you for your prompt attention." I stared at that piece of paper in disbelief. An invoice, late fees. At this point, it wasn't even about $17 anymore. It was about a self-appointed entitlement to my money and time. I balled it up and tossed it in the trash, hands shaking. I spent that evening writing drafts in my journal, working through my frustration. Why does she feel so entitled? Why can't she accept no for an answer? Why is she invading my home to drop off paper bills? How did simple family generosity turn into financial harassment? By Saturday morning, I'd decided I would reach out to Carol directly once, and for all, and make it crystal clear that this ends now. I rehearsed the words in my head on the walk to the coffee shop where she'd agreed to meet, her favorite blueberry muffin spot. My palms were sweaty when I saw her already seated at a corner table, latte in hand, phone buzzing beside her. She looked up and smiled. Predatory, smug. I slid into the chair across from her, took a deep breath and said, "Me, steady. Hi, Grandma Carol. Thanks for meeting me." Carol, pleasant. "Of course, darling. So, have you thought about the fundraiser?" Held up one hand. Me, firm. "I wanted to talk about that. I'm not going to donate to this or any other family-run fundraiser. I have my own budget and priorities, and I don't appreciate being badgered or shamed for a personal decision." Her smile faltered. She raised an eyebrow. Carol, cool. "Well, you know the church needs our help. I don't understand why you're making this difficult." I leaned forward, voice calm but unwavering. "Me, I understand that. But you don't get to decide where my money goes. You asked, I said no. You asked again, I said no. Now you're demanding. That crosses a line. I'm happy to donate to causes I choose, but I will not be bullied or guilt-tripped. No is a I complete sentence." She bristled, inhaled sharply. Carol, livid. "You're being so ungrateful. After everything I've done for you," I cut in. Me, firm. "With all due respect, Grandma, you've done nothing for me." Carol, outraged. "Excuse me?" Me. "I appreciate family dinners, but you've never supported me financially, emotionally, or otherwise, except to take. You've summoned me to FaceTimes to embarrass me. You've called my boyfriend to lecture him. You've slipped invoices under my door. That's not generosity, it's harassment. So this stops now. If you bring it up again, I will block your number, and I will be telling your daughter, my mother-in-law, exactly how you've treated me." Her face went pale. She clutched her latte like a lifeline. I stayed seated, breathing steadily, until finally she looked down at her cup and muttered, "Carol, quiet. Fine. No more." I nodded once, stood up, and left the muffin untouched. I felt a mixture of relief, sadness, and guilt, as though I'd slayed a dragon, but the dragon was my own grandmother. Aftermath and reflection. It's been 3 days since our face-to-face. I haven't blocked her yet, though I'm ready to if she tries anything. Alex supports me fully. He's proud I stood up for myself. His mom, Carol's daughter, finally called me yesterday to apologize, admitting that your grandma can be forceful. She promised Carol wouldn't contact me again. I'm proud I set a boundary, but I'm also grappling with residual guilt. I keep replaying. Was I too harsh? Could I have let it go and just sent the $17? Would that have kept peace? Or would it have just emboldened her to demand more next time? In my heart, I know I did the right thing. My finances, my decisions, my well-being are mine alone. If family can't respect a simple no, then they're not showing the love and mutual respect I thought we had. So, Reddit, Aita for telling my boyfriend's grandma, who kept escalating requests for money, to stop demanding I donate and to leave me alone. Or would I have been the bigger by just handing over the $17 and letting her continue her campaign of guilt and harassment? I'm 33, male, and for as long as I can remember, my relationship with my mom has been complicated. She's charismatic in public, always ready with a laugh or a pointed anecdote. But behind closed doors, she's a whirlwind of narcissism, self-pity, and half-truths. My dad has always been the caretaker, quietly funding the family bills and doing his best to keep the peace. My mom, meanwhile, has a habit of borrowing what she wants, sometimes without ever bothering to ask. When I graduated high school, Dad and I sat down one evening to go over my tuition plan. He handed me a wad of cash, enough to cover my first semester, and said, "Your mom's setting up a trust, but until that's sorted, I don't want you worrying about money." I thanked him and tucked the money away in my bank account. Mom was hovering, smiling so sweetly I thought my teeth might rot. "Don't worry, honey, I've got everything handled. Your college fund is safe." I nodded and believed her, because I wanted to. I wanted to trust that she actually cared. Semester 1 went smoothly. Dad gave Mom another chunk for semester 2. She deposited it without a word, and I breezed through classes. But semester 3 rolled around, and Mom confessed one night over cereal. "Sweetie, I'm so ashamed, but there's nothing left in your tuition fund." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean, nothing?" I asked, my voice catching. She tried to laugh it off. "I did put down your first semester, right? After that, I hit a few financial snags. But it'll all be okay. We'll figure it out. You just handle the studying. I'll handle everything else." I forced a smile and said, "Okay, Mom," because I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't completely blindsided. Over the years, I'd become accustomed to her financial snags, the trips she took, the designer shoes, the extra vacations. My dad never complained, he just quietly wrote another check. Over the next 3 years, I pretended I didn't know. I lied to my classmates about chasing scholarships. I thanked everyone for supporting my schooling, and I took out student loans, lots of them, rather than blow up my parents' trust. I thought I was protecting her, protecting Dad, protecting the family dynamic. Now, 4 years later, I'm finally debt-free, thanks mostly to working every summer, pulling extra shifts as a bartender, and living on instant noodles. Dad passed away last year from a heart attack, leaving me, ultimately, everything. The house, the savings, and yes, the outstanding tuition loans he'd co-signed. I used part of his inheritance to clear my student debt. I haven't told Mom how expensive it was. I wrote that off as part of closing out Dad's estate. My grief over losing him didn't leave much room for bitterness until this past weekend. Every summer, my mom retreats to our family cottage up in the woods. It's a beautiful little place on a quiet lake, but she treats it like her personal kingdom. 90 days a year she's there, posting sun-filtered selfies on social media, complaining when anyone else shows up, and reminding everyone she deserves that break more than anyone. My girlfriend and I have this tradition. We spend 4 days there in August, kayaking, grilling, making s'mores. Dad always supported it, said I needed time to decompress from life in the city. Mom would sigh and glare, but Dad would shrug and say, "Let him go." This year, though, things went off the rails. I got a text on Friday night. "Mom, you know the cottage doesn't maintain itself. Since you two use it every summer, I think it's fair you pay something toward upkeep. How about $1,000? My heart sunk. I stared at the screen, picturing Dad's face. He'd be rolling in his grave if he saw this. I thumbed out a reply. Me. Hey, that seems high. You know Dad was footing. Maintenance costs his whole life. Maybe take it out of what you still owe me from my tuition. If you want, we can talk to him and come up with a fair split." And then I froze. The minute I hit send, I felt that old burn of anger and disappointment. I hadn't thought about the tuition I owe you in years. But I couldn't let her slip another $1,000 from her queen of the cottage budget without calling her on it. Her response was instant and furious. "Mom, how dare you bring up that again? It's manipulative to threaten to tell your father. You're acting like a child. I can't believe you'd stoop so low." I read the text 3 times, jaw clenched. She was pretending Dad was still alive. She was pretending she still had somewhere to hide behind. I typed back, "Me. I'm not threatening anything. I'm just pointing out that you've been living off Dad's generosity for decades, including stealing my tuition money. You asked me to keep it from him. That was your choice. Let's just settle this honestly." Then she went radio silent. I could almost hear her raging on the other end, hurling accusations at me through the phone. After that, I sat on my couch, staring at my phone. I felt a jumble of things. Anger that she'd robbed me of a debt-free start at adulthood. Guilt that I'd never confronted her earlier. Grief for Dad that sprang up whole and raw. And frustration that I still felt like a kid arguing with his mom. I called my girlfriend and poured it all out. She listened, sympathetic, and reminded me that I'd done nothing wrong by asking her to honor what she owed me. On Sunday morning, I drove out to the cottage anyway, my girlfriend in tow, tents and coolers and folding chairs in the back of my car. I knocked on the door, and Mom answered in a sundress, hair perfectly curled, mouth set in that "I'm slightly annoyed but still charming" line. I said, "Hey, I got your text. We came out anyway because, well, we already planned, and I'd really like for us to figure out the money thing now." Her eyes narrowed. "I thought you said you weren't going to bring that up here." I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, but this feels important. You asked me to cover $1,000 of the maintenance, which you'd never done before. I suggested offsetting it against the money you owe me from college. Dad would have agreed that's fair, if he were here. Since he's not, I'm asking you to pay your share." There was a long pause. She folded her arms. "My share? You realize your dad never let me run this place into the ground. I've kept it in perfect shape for decades. You show up 3 days a year and suddenly it's a money issue?" "I'm not saying you asked for charity," I said quietly. "I'm saying you used Dad's money to cover mine. You told me you'd pay it back. You didn't. I've been paying the loans for years. When Dad died, I paid them off with part of his estate because I figured it was the right thing to do. But that doesn't mean I'm fine with you taking more money without holding up your end," she huffed. "I never agreed to that as payment." Then, in one of those moments I know all too well, her voice cracked on a sob. "I don't have any money now. Do you know how hard things have been? I needed extra cash." Suddenly I felt something shift, pity mixed with rage. "You knew I took out loans in my name. You knew. You asked me to keep it from him, and I did. I didn't tell Dad because I thought it would ruin you. I thought he'd be disappointed. And now I realize I spent years hiding from the truth instead of standing up for myself." She brushed past me into the cottage, corners of her mouth twitching with outrage. I set my bag down on the porch and turned to my girlfriend, who'd been standing quietly behind me. She gave me a small, sympathetic nod. Mom spoke from the kitchen. "Fine. If you want to be so vindictive, bill me whatever you want. But don't expect me to actually pay it," I called out. "Just let me know what you'll write me as an invoice. I'll deduct it from whatever you decide you owe." Then I left. My girlfriend and I pitched our tent down by the lake, skipping. Her glares and Mom's screeches about how ungrateful I was. We caught fish, made breakfast over the fire, and for a few hours I forgot the whole thing. Driving home, though, I felt drained. Am I the AH for dredging up old wounds and refusing to pay my mom's sudden cottage fee? If I'd just paid $1,000, I'd avoid this showdown. But I can't shake the feeling that letting her off the hook would be letting her keep stealing from me. I'm hurt that she feels entitled to charge me for a place Dad provided, and I'm hurt that I never stood up for myself before. On one hand, it feels petty to float an IOU from 10 years ago. On the other, it feels like the only leverage I have against someone who's never had to face consequences for her actions. I don't want to ruin our relationship, if that was even a thing to begin with, but I also can't let myself be the bank for her whims. So Reddit. Aida for telling my mom she can bill me using the tuition money she stole, rather than paying her requested cottage fees. Should I just swallow my pride and cover the maintenance costs to keep the peace? Or am I justified in insisting she honor what she owes me first? Okay, so this all started last summer, when I moved into the little duplex I'm renting. It looked charming online. White siding, green trim, a perfect little front porch with 2 rocking chairs. And the rent was surprisingly reasonable for the neighborhood. What the listing didn't mention was how thin the fences are, or how thin my next-door neighbor's patience can get. My neighbor, let's call him Gary, is a gruff guy in his early 50s who always seems to be either yelling at someone on the phone or barking orders at his massive German shepherd, Brutus. On day 1, I waved hello as I was carrying boxes inside. Brutus barreled at the fence, teeth bared, and let out this guttural roar that rattled the windows. I froze, boxes in hand, and the dog snarled until I retreated into my apartment. First impressions and all that. Over the next few weeks, every time I stepped outside, whether to take out the trash, water my little herb garden, or just sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, Brutus would erupt. He'd sprint to the fence, line, hackles up, teeth bared, and bark so ferociously I thought he might burst through the thin wood boards. I'd jump every time, heart pounding, and I'm sure to him it looked like I was terrified. I knew dogs could be trained to guard, but this felt personal, like he actually hated me. Gary, meanwhile, would stand in his yard, arms crossed, shouting, "Behave!" at Brutus in a tone that sounded more like he was coaching a football team than disciplining a pet. It was intimidating, weird, and frankly a little sad. I tried talking to Gary, politely suggesting he maybe invest in thicker fencing or some training classes for Brutus. He brushed me off, saying, "He just needs boundaries, sweetheart," in that condescending way he had. After a few of these encounters, him shouting, me pacing back into my house, Brutus snarling behind him, I started dreaming up solutions. I didn't want to turn into the neighborhood weirdo, but I also didn't want to feel like I was under siege every time I stepped outside. One evening I was grilling steaks for dinner, just a simple weeknight thing, and as the aroma wafted over to Brutus's side of the fence, I noticed him sitting about 10 feet back, watching me, ears perked. He looked more curious than ferocious. A light bulb went off. The next time I fired up the grill, I sliced off a tiny piece of steak, barely a quarter-inch cube, and tossed it over the fence toward Brutus. He sniffed it, nosed it to be sure, then gulped it down, looking surprised. I froze, hard in my throat. Then his tail gave this little wag, and he let out a soft woof of air through his nose, like he was savoring it. Encouraged, I did it again a few nights later. Then again, when I had leftovers. Within a week, instead of lunging at the fence and barking, he would come thundering across his yard, sit politely by the fence line, and trot over to the spot where I'd been standing. He'd sit there, head tilted, waiting for me to toss him. His treat. In my head I was thinking, this is so bizarre, but it's working. Meanwhile, I felt a pang of guilt. I'm not a veterinarian or a professional dog trainer. I'm just someone who likes a quiet porch and figured maybe a little kind gesture would help. And it did. I'll admit, it was kind of fun to walk out of my front door and have this enormous dog greet me like we were old friends instead of a snarling beast trying to bite me. We developed this routine. I'd head out around 6:30 p.m. each evening, flip through my pile of mail or talk on the phone with my sister, and Brutus would come racing over. He'd circle once, drop to a sit, and stare hopefully at my hand where I always kept a tiny Tupperware container of steak scraps. After he finished, he'd hop backwards a few feet, press his rump flat against the fence, and grin at me with this goofy dog smile. True story. I started looking forward to it. Flash forward about 2 months. Pretty much everyone in the neighborhood knew the fence lady fed Brutus his evening steak. A few times I caught deliveries guys chatting on Gary's stoop, chuckling about how the owner was losing his own dog's loyalty. It baffled me that Gary didn't seem to notice. Maybe he was too busy yelling at the mailman for accidentally putting a package on the wrong porch. Or maybe he was in denial. Either way, Brutus had officially gone rogue. He ignored Gary's calls, his treats, even cowboy hats, which I know is his favorite treat. Tested it one afternoon when I had one lying around. Then came the day Gary stormed over. I was watering my mint plants when I heard a furious knocking on the door. I opened it to find him red-faced, veins bulging, waving his fist. "What the hell have you been doing with my dog?" he barked. Brutus was at his side, muzzle twitching, ears flattened, clearly nervous around the shouting. "He won't even eat unless it's from the fence lady," Gary yelled. "He acts like I'm some stranger now. He won't listen. I can't even take him for a walk without him whining and trying to bolt back to your place." I raised my hands in a placating gesture. "Hey, I get it. Your dog's been upset, but I thought I was helping. You yelled at him so much I figured he'd respond better to kindness. He scoffed. Kindness? You emotionally hijacked my dog. That's what you did. You've got to stop feeding him. Don't ever talk to him again. I assured Gary I'd stop giving Brutus steaks at once. Isn't it weird, I thought, that when he yelled steak, he always pronounced the A like a nursery rhyme, but when some guy politely cooked one next door, he lost his mind. I took the Tupperware container inside, tucked it under the sink, and went back out to apologize to Brutus by patting the fence, no food in hand. He whined, pawed at the fence, and pressed his snout through the slats to find my hand. My heart twisted. I felt awful. I'd unwittingly turned him against his owner, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. Word spread fast. Some neighbors thought the whole thing was hilarious, a suburban sitcom scenario. "Have you tried feeding Brutus chicken nuggets yet?" texted my friend from across the street. This is gold. Others, like Gary's sister who lives a block away, were outraged. She cornered me at the community barbecue and hissed, "You're a canine homewrecker. You should have minded your own business." I did my best to explain that I didn't set out to wreck a home. I just wanted peace and quiet. And Brutus seemed to need someone on his side. She glared and walked off with her macaroni salad, leaving me feeling judged and guilty and kind of proud at the same time. Okay, maybe not proud, but amused. Here's where I'm stuck. I stopped feeding Brutus, but he still watches me through the fence. No more dancing, no more tail wags, just those big brown eyes locked on mine like, "Where'd you go?" When I step outside, he doesn't bark anymore. He just stares. One evening I whispered, "Hey buddy, it's okay." And he tilted his head and let out this tiny whimper. I swear he looks sad, like he's missing a close friend. Meanwhile, Gary treats him like nothing happened. He tries to leash him for walks, but Brutus resists, whining and pacing, until Gary throws up his hands and goes inside. It's the strangest custody battle ever. I keep flipping through this scenario in my mind, wondering if I really messed things up. On one hand, I feel responsible for creating tension between Gary and his dog. I manipulated an emotional bond, even if my intentions were good. On the other hand, Brutus seems happier, less anxious, more eager for human interaction, and dare I say, grateful. I never meant to harm the relationship, just to calm the barking and tension. I didn't sit there thinking, I'm gonna steal this guy's dog. I just had some steak scraps and thought, why not try? But now Gary's dog is practically in witness protection, hiding on my side of the fence, giving me those puppy eyes. So here I am, a 29-year-old woman living in a duplex, inadvertently launching a four-legged betrayal, and I've become the neighborhood's most notorious dog whisperer. I'm kind of mortified, kind of amused, and definitely torn. I eat her for feeding my neighbor's aggressive dog steaks in secret until he liked me better than his owner. Or was I just helping a poor dog find some kindness? I really don't know where the line is anymore.